Hello and welcome, Fright fans, to this, the Horror Story Corner, where today we have a wholly original fear fable. It's a tiny traversal into the realms of terror and centers around a man at the end of his rope. Luckily, a creature known as the Little Man reaches him in time and serves to provide a new lease on life. But what are the Little Man's true intentions, and will they lead us all to the dark recesses of the Horror Story Corner? I hope you enjoy The Little Man. It was shortly after 11, and everyone else was asleep when the Little Man came to me. I was looking into the mirror and flossing as the small, bony hand and yellowed nails wrapped around the door, tapping almost imperceptibly. It gave me a start to notice the fingers rapping and tapping, and he took my recoiling at them as an insult. Pulling his entire being into the room, I saw the anger and offence on his features. I thought he was here to harm me, and although he barely reached my knee in height, a primal fear made me curl into the corner of the room beside the bin. The Little Man can't speak words, but he can think thoughts to you. He says it's a talent of his. He can think thoughts right into people's brains, and I can hear him just as clearly as if he had spoken. He could also send emotions. On that first night, he sent me pity, and he sent me feelings of safety, friendship. I looked at the Little Man again. He had eyes that were too wide, and teeth too large and too square, some blackened and some broken. His mouth was a crooked, wavy line supported by a sagging, crumpled and broken jawbone. His left arm was so long and so thin it made me queasy, and his right arm was so short it was barely more than a hand. His legs were equal in size. He was naked and hunched, hairless and sitting on his haunches. He smiled, and I began to like him. He taught me things, told me that it was okay to feel blue. He reminded me that things wouldn't always feel the way they do now. He said he'd see me through it. It's a good thing, too, as I had set aside the razor and warm water in the sink for after I'd finished my teeth. I didn't want to do that now, though. I put the razor blade away, and I emptied the sink. I looked into the Little Man's eyes. They were eyes that some would find scary. I can still find them slightly unsettling when the large veins pulse with a dark throbbing crimson. But when you look into them, and when he thinks into your head, they can be quite calming, almost musical, not unlike a softly sung lullaby. He told me he thought it would be a bad idea if I told others about him, but I disagreed. The next morning, at breakfast, I introduced the Little Man to my wife and children. They ignored him and were quite rude. The Little Man pulled my daughter's chair out from under her. She fell over and smashed her face onto the breakfast bar I'd built for her and her brother. There was a lot of blood, and my wife thought it was strange when I laughed, but the Little Man was lying down and making angel shapes in the spilled milk and blood, and I couldn't help myself. Then my wife lied. She said that I'd pulled the chair, said that I needed to stop playing sick games. Some police officers questioned me, but it was okay, because I let the Little Man do the thinking for me, and he did some great thinking. He told me I should say that the girl fell, that things with the wife hadn't been good, that she was looking for excuses to leave. The police didn't have any evidence, my word against my wife's. My daughter didn't know, said she hadn't seen. She had to have reconstructive surgery. Lost a lot of teeth, I think. After I'd settled in my new flat, living with the Little Man, he suggested that he should come to work with me. I told him not to bother. Told him that work made me think bad things about myself, made me want to do bad things to myself. I told him about the razor, and told him how he'd saved me that night. The Little Man didn't look surprised, but he did look like he was decaying. There were new holes in his face that were oozing black liquid. Sometimes his face would make a mess on the floor, but I didn't mind. I could clean that up. The little man had been good to me. The little man thought into me, putting his voice in my head. I noticed how loud it sounded, much louder than the voice that I thought with. He said that it would be good for him to see my work. He said he wanted to be there for me. Said that we could work out a way for me to be happy. At work, people were mean. They put piles of documents on my desk that made me sad. They shouted at me for being at home sick and told me that I was useless. One mean bully said that he was surprised my wife hadn't left me years ago and that she'd already blown everyone in town. The little man grew red, demonic. His body swelled with faces of rage that pushed against his skin, revealing hidden monstrosities beneath his thin, pale blue flesh. He thought for me, louder than I'd ever heard. He told me that I should wedge the 2 doors to the office closed, and that he would take care of the rest. For a time after that, it was suspected that I'd set the fire that killed everyone. I was a little mad at the little man for making it seem like it was me, and when I told people about the little man, they all thought I'd lost my mind. They can't see him like I can, I've noticed, and that makes it hard for them to believe me. Regardless, I still trust the little man. I can't help but trust him, and I can't help but do as he instructs me to do. His thoughts have just gotten so loud. I lied to the police, told them I'd gone out for lunch when the fire started. A lot of evidence burnt up, but I could see they thought it was me. I could see that soon I'd be put in prison. Tonight, I asked the little man what I should do. He thought it was a good idea to kill my wife and children. I liked the way he smiled when he said it. He asked me if the razor blade was still in the bathroom for afterwards. I told him that I would check, and I will. I can hear what he's thinking, and it scares me a bit now. What scares me most is how good of an idea the little man is making me think it is, because I could swear that there's this other, quieter voice, an old voice that used to be in my head, and if I'm not much mistaken, it's screaming at the happy demonic face of the little man, the newly empty sockets that still drip with the rancid rotting leftovers of its eyes. The old voice is crying over what I'm going to do to my family, and it's trying with all its might to make me stop and run away instead. But I can't hear it very well over the thoughts of the little man, and it's so much easier to let him think, and let everything else just stop. Let everything stop. Well, looks like our protagonist has been led astray by the little man, and has committed inexcusable acts. But what of this strange creature that can think its thoughts straight into you? Is it corporeal, or just some demonic incarnation of severe depression? One thing is for sure. If you should ever hear his ethereal thought whisper drifting out from the horror story corner, you must lock all of your doors, bar all of your windows, and pray that he doesn't make it to the inside of your mind. Thank you for listening, and as ever, sleep well.